The old man's hands were shaking so badly that the teacup slipped from his fingers and shattered against the marble floor. No one in the house moved to help him. For 6 years, that piano in the corner of his living room had not been touched, not once. His daughter-in-law had learned to walk around it like it was a piece of furniture no one was allowed to mention. Then, on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, a new housekeeper sat down at that piano without asking permission, and what happened next made the old man weep in a way his own family had never seen. Before we continue, if stories about second chances and quiet kindness move you, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Narratives. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? We always love hearing how far these stories travel. The old man's name was Arthur Bellingham. At 78, he lived in a large house on the edge of town with his son Marcus, a busy real estate developer, and Marcus's wife, Elena. From the outside, it looked like Arthur had everything: a warm home, a caring family, a comfortable life. But anyone who spent more than a day in that house noticed something odd. The beautiful grand piano sitting in the living room was always closed, always dusted, and always silent. Arthur had once been a piano teacher. For 30 years, his fingers had filled that house with music. But 6 years ago, his wife Margaret passed away, and from the day of her funeral, Arthur never touched the keys again. Marcus had tried everything to bring his father back to life, hired music therapists, bought new sheet music, even flew in an old student of Arthur's from another city to visit. Nothing worked. Arthur would sit near the piano for hours, staring at it, but his hands never moved toward it. Doctors said there was nothing physically wrong with him. What Arthur carried wasn't an illness a prescription could fix. It was grief that had turned into silence. Marcus loved his father, but like many people who show love through providing, he had convinced himself that comfort and convenience were enough. He paid for everything his father could need. What he hadn't learned to give was his time, his patience, or simply his presence. Then came Nadia Osei, a 39-year-old woman hired as the new housekeeper. Unlike the therapists and specialists before her, Nadia didn't try to talk to Arthur about the piano at all. She simply watched him. On her second day, she noticed a small framed photograph resting on top of the piano, a much younger Arthur seated at the keys, laughing, while a woman leaned against his shoulder, clearly mid-song. Nadia understood something the others had missed. Arthur wasn't avoiding the piano because it reminded him of loss. He was avoiding it because playing again, without Margaret there to listen, felt like admitting she was truly gone. That Thursday afternoon, while dusting the living room, Nadia sat down at the piano, something no one in the house had dared to do in 6 years, and began playing a slow, simple melody. Not a performance, just a few gentle notes, the kind a beginner plays while still learning. Arthur, resting in his armchair nearby, opened his eyes. He didn't say anything at first. He simply watched her hands move clumsily over the keys. Then, almost without realizing it, he stood up, walked over, and sat beside her on the bench. He reached out and adjusted her fingers on the keys, gently correcting her hand position, the way a teacher does out of instinct rather than thought. For the first time in 6 years, Arthur Bellingham's hands touched the piano. Marcus walked in just as his father began playing a few notes alongside Nadia, hesitant, imperfect, but real. He stood frozen in the doorway, afraid that if he moved, the moment would break. When Arthur finally stopped, tears were running down his face. He looked at Nadia and asked quietly, "Why did you sit down there?" Nadia admitted that back home, her own grandmother had stopped singing after her grandfather passed away. Until one day a neighbor's child sat at their old radio and started humming, off-key and unafraid, and something in her grandmother softened. Nadia said she never forgot how a small, imperfect act could do what words could not. Arthur reached over and placed his hand on top of hers. He told her that every time he looked at the piano, he heard Margaret's voice asking him to play just one more song. He had stopped playing not because the music hurt, but because playing without her listening felt like proof that she was really gone. Hearing someone else, however clumsily, sit at those keys had, for a strange reason, made him feel like Margaret was in the room again, listening. From that afternoon, everything slowly changed. Arthur began playing again, just a little each evening. Marcus started coming home earlier, sitting on the living room couch simply to listen, something he hadn't done in years. Elena would bring 3 cups of tea instead of one now, one for Arthur, one for herself, and one for Nadia, who was no longer treated as staff, but as family. Months later, Marcus offered Nadia a raise and asked what she wanted in return. She smiled and said she only wanted the piano to keep being played. That answer stayed with him, because Nadia hadn't healed Arthur with therapy sessions or expensive equipment. She had done it with something far simpler: courage, gentleness, and the willingness to sit down beside someone else's silence. If this story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need a little hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Narratives for more stories like this one. And before we go, comment, "Music still heals," if you believe that sometimes the smallest, most imperfect gesture can bring someone back to life. Because sometimes, people don't need grand solutions. They just need someone willing to sit down beside their silence and begin. End.